Bro, what is up with your nose, dog?
I got into a fight, bro.
Oh, you just never fixed it?
No.
Yeah, I've seen your videos before.
So you're political. You're invested in the conflict.
I'm Palestinian. I have to
You're
be.
into Palestine. Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, bro.
Now,
I'm doing a little thing. Which one of these is Gaza?
which one of those? That would be bottom left.
So C.
Yep.
The Palestinian got 1 out of 4 right. Next question. Yeah, into Muslim,
I'm an atheist.
but the parents Muslim or
It doesn't
Masihi.
matter. I grew up in a secular household.
Okay. Which one of these is Al-Aqsa? Masjid Al-Aqsa.
That would be Dome of the Rock on the top right. Masjid al-Aqsa. Bro, it's really small. I can barely see, but I'm assuming Masjid al-Aqsa is bottom right.
Bro, you're bringing honor to the Palestinian. This was going to be easy for you. Oh, whoops! I've just even easier as I clicked it. Which language was spoken first in the
English,
lands?
Greek, Arabic, or Hebrew? First, I mean, it wouldn't be any of those. It would be a Canaanite language.
Which of those is in the Canaanite language family?
Hebrew.
Yes. Okay, my guy. You got just out of curiosity. Are the Palestinians Hebrews?
Vast majority of them
Really?
descend from. No, vast majority of them descend from Canaanites. But I mean, I'm sure you're aware that Israelites were a subgroup of Canaanites, correct?
So academic scholars say that. I'm a religious guy, so it's not what I believe. But yes.
Oh, I'm fully academic. I don't argue
Okay.
religious stuff.
Okay. So, but then, if you're fully academic, can you explain how the Palestinians descend from Canaanites?
Yeah, through DNA testing, through
Okay. Which
haplogroups and other genetic
perfect,
indicators.
perfect, perfect. So, which studies?
Harvard studies. I mean, Harvard is the main one that I've seen.
Okay. What does it say?
That Palestinians, the vast majority, derive 80 to 85% of their DNA from Bronze Age Levantine people.
I mean, that's definitely not what the study says. But just before we get into that, most Palestinians know where their family came from. Would you agree with that? So, like the Barghouthis, the Tamimis, the Darwish, all the major families, the
I
Nashashibis.
think no, these names transgress. Bro, look here. The problem is pan-Arabism. See, so these names, like for example, a lot of Zionists loves to say Al-Masri is the most common name in Gaza, for example. Well, obviously, there's going to be a lot of admixture between Egyptians and
Yeah.
Palestinians in Gaza due to the proximity. But these names transgress certain Arab populations. Like you'll have a Saudi guy the same last name as an Egyptian guy. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
But the Al Masris, I mean, there's multiple Al Masri families, yeah? It's not like one
Yeah,
family is
yeah,
Al Masri.
yeah.
So
No, there's multiple.
in Nablus, one of the biggest families in Nablus is Al Masri, and they came in 1830.
Okay.
Um, so different Masris came. That was under Ibrahim Pasha. Different families came at different times, but the families usually have a strong record, particularly the Al Ashraf. You know Al Ashraf, the Ashraf from Muhammad. So many will claim descent from Muhammad. So
Okay.
I don't want you to dox yourself because you're on the internet, and that would be like stupid. But I'm very confident that there's a strong chance I would be able to say when your family, at least your surname, arrived in Alad al Muqaddasa. Because most of the
Oh, I don't
Palestinians.
want to give my surname, dude. That's a bit
Really?
because I'm aware of your channel. I know you have like viewers, so I don't really want to give my surname
Yeah, that's what I'm
to.
saying. Don't dox yourself. I said don't. For that reason, I
But
don't
it,
want.
it is my surname is a common Arab last name. Like you find it in the Levant, you find it in Egypt, you'll find it in Morocco. It's just a very like it's just an Arabic word.
So I'm sure that and I'm sure your family has a record of who they came over with, because most of them do, whether it was Umar ibn al-Khattab, Salahuddin, the Mamluks, that most people know when they arrived. So a lot of the Egyptians came over in Ottoman times, like Ibrahim Pasha,
Correct.
etc.
Correct.
And if you look at all the major Palestinian resistance, freedom fighters, Izzadin, Al-Qassam, etc., they're not from here. You look at the big families, the Husseinis, they descend from Muhammad. You can trace most of these according to them, according to their tradition.
Yeah, see, I don't necessarily take into account religious. I'm very much secular, and I don't I don't like to argue theology. You know, this is not
I
a
agree.
theology.
I agree. It's a dumb thing to argue because
By
it's
the way, I
based
just
on.
want to apologize first off. When I entered, I made a comment about your nose that I was just being addicted.
No,
I
it's cool, bro.
I don't mean to have like a immature conversation, but yeah.
No,
Anyways, all I'm
you
saying
don't need to
is,
apologize. You're chill, and it's usually swear words. It's usually kusum makusukta. So you're supposed relatively time.
yeah. No, because I have seen you say some things that I agree with. But I have seen a lot of things you say that I do heavily disagree with. I'm very much pro-Palestinian liberation. I'm pretty sure you're very pro-Zionist.
Yeah, I'm for the absolute. I will do everything within my power to prevent a Palestinian state from ever being created, ever. But I want every Arab that lives here to have the same opportunities that I have. So I don't want statehood for the Arabs. I want equality. I think Palestinianism was created as an identity to destroy my identity, Zionism, Israel. I don't think Palestine and Israel can coexist. I don't think there can ever be a two-state solution. And therefore, I think the best thing for both of us is if one of us wins and gives the other equality.
Okay. So you think the West Bank and Gaza should be Israel proper,
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
and you
Like
don't see any of the you don't see anything happening in the West Bank as terrorism or forced expulsion
I wouldn't say anything. I would consider some things that Jews have done in Judea and Samaria to be terrorism. But I say the overwhelm, like settler violence it's not a myth, it exists, but it's insane when you get into the stats, as an example. So, like for instance, would you consider the biggest study on settler violence is the UN, and they put out statistics saying there's around 8,000 incidents since 2016 to 2023, so before October the 7th.
right?
And in their stats, they record everything. It was difficult for an organization to get to, but they're able to break down everything. And so, would you consider a Jew visiting the Temple Mount as settler violence?
No.
I'd even extend that. Would you consider clashes between the security forces on the Temple Mount with rioters, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims on the Temple Mount? Would you consider that settler violence?
I mean, that's a loaded question. How did the conflict begin? Why is
No,
there
it's
conflict?
more like, do you consider the security forces on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as settler violence? Or when you talk about settler violence, are you talking about...
No, I mean the walk around with like herds of sheep and guns backed by the IDF.
Exactly, and this is my point. And so,
old ladies and stuff.
so exploring that, would you consider someone hiking on through a Palestinian olive grove? Would you consider that no damage done to property, no harm done to people? Would you consider that settler violence?
No, just respect it as autonomous Palestinian land.
So this is the thing. The UN statistics, 16% of them were instances of settler violence, were Jews visiting the Temple Mount or Palestinians clashing with the Israeli security forces on the Mount. Another 20%, I think maybe even higher, was people hiking, walking, being present on what the UN considers Palestinian land. And then there was another...
The world considers the West Bank and Gaza to be...
Well, it doesn't matter what the world considers.
Why not?
Because the world's consideration doesn't make something a fact.
So then Israel wouldn't be a fact.
Well, no, Israel. I mean, a lot of countries in the
You
world
were
don't
only
recognize Israel.
identified because the UN recognized you.
The United Nations don't exist because of the United Nations. We exist
You
because we declared independence and were able to
through
retain.
terror.
No, not the terrorism was on your side, but we were able to retain our borders. We were able to repel the enemy.
Discuss that for a second.
Yeah, sure.
So obviously there was the three militias, primarily the Lahi, the Irgun, and the Haganah that formed the founding militias of Israel.
Yeah.
Officially, two out of the three, the Lahi and the Irgun, were identified as terrorist groups
By the British, because by the British.
By Israel themselves.
Right. So the Irgun was absorbed. Both were absorbed into the Israeli Defense Force. The Haganah before was against the Irgun. I mean, there was almost even a civil war at one point between the two organizations because the Irgun refused to subordinate itself to the Haganah. So they would run arms in breach of the British arms embargo. But ignoring all of that, just because.
But I just want to make a point. Just let me land my point. So the Liha and the Irgun were both established terrorist organizations.
No, I mean I reject your. But continue your point.
But that's a fact, though. We can
because you say something as a fact, and because you can find the British saying so, does not make it a fact. The British was at war with us. What was let me just flip that around. What was the Lehis who? Let's go to the most extreme of the two. What was the Lehis' motivation for going to war with the British?
Because the British hadn't fully abandoned the Arab cause of liberation.
The British put a ban on Jewish immigration to British mandatory Palestine during the Holocaust. The British were only given
mass immigration.
No, so it was limited to 10,000 people a year during the Holocaust. Meanwhile, there was mass migration, unfettered migration of Arabs, which is how we come to the names before. Many of the surnames we're reading came during the mandate period. A lot of Egyptians came for work. There's Al Jazeera documentaries on this you can watch.
Wait, but do you think Egyptians and Palestinians, like for me, for example, do you think I hold the same DNA as an Egyptian would?
It depends on your ethnic origins. Yes, potentially no.
Well, I don't, because I've taken the DNA.
Yeah, so that's why I said it. I said it depends on your ethnicity. You could be a Bushnik. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your ethnic ancestry is. Like the Palestinians are an incredibly diverse, which is why I think it's dumb when people say things like, I don't mean to diss you, you diss my nose, I'm going to slightly diss you. I think it's dumb when people say the majority of Palestinians trace their DNA back to Canaanites, when the Palestinians are one of the most ethnically diverse people there are. If you go through Ramallah, if you go to any Palestinian city, you'll see a huge range of skin tone, hair color, eye color. Why? Because there are centuries and centuries of different people living in this land. Some of them, and so
modern nation states are a relatively new thing. I mean, it was greater Syria. I mean, include Jordan, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. Like there was tons of admixture. Like there's no doubt about that. But all I'm saying is there are distinctions between them. I mean, Syrians, you'll find more heavy Aramean admixture in their DNA. Or
I'd agree with that. I wouldn't argue with that. When people claim that Palestinians are Canaanites, I think it's poor science, poor history, and I think it's political. If people were to say there are Palestinians with Canaanite DNA, Canaanite ancestry, I'd say absolutely. It's when they make it in the same saying. The overwhelming majority of Jews share DNA. We have DNA in common. I'm Ashkenazi Jewish. The overwhelming majority of Ashkenazi Jews descend from a very small population.
Genetic bottleneck in Europe.
Exactly. So there's nothing I can tell you on this. So we have between 40 to 60% Levantine DNA.
60 is a bit on the high end, but okay.
No, 40 to 60, so put it down the middle, it's most likely 50%. And the majority of European is Southern European, pre the bottleneck. So this is going back, will be like many centuries before.
Yeah.
And so we go back. You go back. Who was here first? Maybe you were here first. Maybe you are a Canaanite. I don't know. But what we do have is we have a continuous, unbroken oral collective memory that we were here. We never lost the tradition. There was a continuous presence of Jews in the land. You take somewhere like Hebron's a great example. There was an ancient Jewish community in Hebron, Khalil, for millennia. It was destroyed in 1929 with the massacre. In contrast, the Arabs, the majority of Muslims living in Hebron, or not the majority, a third of them, are Kurdi, of Kurdish descent. They're not Canaanite, they're Kurds. And that, over the centuries, will change.
I never made the argument that other ethnicities didn't live in Palestine. And
okay.
I didn't say it was exclusively Palestinians. I'm saying Palestinians as a people are a people who shared an a distinct ethnicity, distinct to that of Lebanese people.
But you don't, and this is the thing, you don't. And the Palestinian identity was created to rally all the people that were living in the borders that the British drew, Western British Mandatory Palestine, under an identity to fight the other identity that was present in that land. The identity that was present was the Jewish one, the Zionist. And so Palestinianism evolved and was promoted and pushed and adopted as a means to end Zionist ambitions, Jewish ambitions. It was a reactionary identity born out of necessity.
You tend to conflate Zionism ambitions with Jewish ambitions when I would argue that they're entirely in opposition to one another.
Zionism is not in opposition to Judaism.
I think the modern state of Israel makes Jews less safe than they ever would have been living in a secular, democratic Palestine.
Yeah, you're right. Jews were much safer in Nazi Germany than they were in Israel today.
I mean, look, you can look Nazi Germany and Jews. I'm not a Holocaust denier. But I will say there are certain questions that do need to be answered. But anyways, the Nazis aside, there is a problem of Jewish supremacy that I believe has taken part across the world throughout history. And Jews tend to not.
What's an example of Jewish supremacy in history?
I mean, okay, so we could go back to tropes like usury and things like that, but then you could argue, obviously, that Jews were forced into doing usury.
But even if we willingly did usury, that's not supremacy. Supremacy is a belief that you're superior.
That it says that Gentiles, you can sort of rip off Gentiles, and
where does it say that? Where does it say that in my book?
I believe in the Talmud somewhere it says like.
No, it doesn't say that in the Talmud.
It doesn't.
And if you want to talk about supremacy, Islam is one of the most supremacist religions around. It literally has it slaughters the mushrikeen, and al-kitab it subjugates as one of the dhimma and charges them jizya until the wahum saghirun, until they're completely humble.
Yeah, but I mean, you guys also do have access to heaven in Islam, which I also know that in Judaism, Gentiles do have access to heaven, but I'm not sure if it's like a Gentile heaven and then there's like a Jewish heaven.
It's the same heaven. It's the same heaven.
See, because a lot of you guys disagree with each other, so it's hard to get
but that's the same with any religion. It's the same way. But basically, the Jewish principle is everyone is created in the image of God, and
but you guys don't proselytize. Like, you don't want everyone to be Jewish.
I know. I don't want you to be Jewish. I'm happy for you to remain atheist, Palestinian, whatever you are, Muslim.
But see, here's where the supremacy comes into place. Because why would you not want everyone to be?
Very easy. Very, very, very easy. I believe you're gonna. If you lead a good, righteous life, it's easier to get the Jannah, the Olam Haba, as a Gentile, a Goy, than it is as a Yehudi. For a Yehudi,
wait, so you agree that Goy means Gentile, not nation?
So Goy means that the nation. It means nation, and the people that are called Goy more than anyone else in the Torah are the Jewish people, Bnei Israel.
They're called Goy what?
Goyim means nation. So when we say Goyim,
but there's a word that follows when it's referred.
Oh, Goy Gadol. There's various different ones. Okay, great nation meaning that you will be a large nation, or an accomplished nation, a separate nation. There are different. There are a holy nation. There are different expressions that are used, but because Goy just means nation, so Goy isn't a slur. It just means nation. So
But you refer
colloquially,
to Gentiles as
yeah,
goy.
colloquially, because the Torah, not the Torah, sorry, through history, the Jewish people have referred to the other nations. So instead of just saying the other nations, it's inferred when you say goyim, you're talking about other people, and then that meant that goy was adapted by Jews over the centuries to mean a non-Jew. It's not a slur, but it can mean a non-Jew. It can also mean a Jew, but usually any Jew would understand when you
But it
say
is
goy.
often used as a slur.
Pardon?
It is often used as a slur by
No,
Zionists.
no, not by that. So goy would be used probably as in the way that you're saying, most likely be used by very insular, ultra-religious communities rather than people that you see and brand. Like someone like Netanyahu, for instance, is not going to be using the word goy as a slur.
He'll just say Amalek.
Amalek is typically, in the West, how the word Nazi is used to describe anybody who somebody doesn't like. So if you're a vegan, somebody who eats meat is a Nazi. That's kind of how Amalek is used by the Jewish people. It's the ultimate enemy. Typically, an enemy that wants to destroy us, we call Amalek. You can't just call somebody, you wouldn't use it to describe a non-Jew.
Right. Okay, so I just have a question because so why do you are you an Orthodox Jew?
Yeah.
But you don't wear the hat and the black the
There are
outfit.
different. The clothing of Jews
Those are
usually
Hasidic.
connotates which stream of Jewish thought you belong to.
So
So
those would be Hasidic?
no, so the umbrella term would be Haredi. Haredi is
Right.
includes Hasidic. It would include a Litvak. It's a term that's used to describe Jews who are religious and conform to a certain lifestyle and certain traditions. I belong
Okay.
to a community which is just as religious, but doesn't emphasize things like clothing, and really emphasizes the importance of the land and settling the
Okay.
land.
Okay. I asked you that because I wanted to ask a follow-up because so do you reject the idea that the state of Israel cannot be formed until the return of the Messiah?
Obviously, yeah.
Is that not like within the Torah or
Let
like
me
why
read
do
you the verse. Let me read you the verse. The Jews that reject Israel as a Jewish state, which they base it on. Bear with me.
because I genuinely don't know. There's so much disagreement within the Jewish community that you can't even.
Bear with me. I'm just going to pull up. I should have memorized this, but I haven't. Samaria 2:7. I think it's 2:7. Okay. So, I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, by gazelles or by hinds of the field, do not wake or rouse, love until it please. That's the verse they use to say that Jews can't have a state.
Okay, well, I'll have to take your word for it.
No, it's based on a Talmudic
That doesn't
conversation.
really.
Yeah, it's based on a Talmudic conversation which says that the Jews shouldn't have a state. It's a conversation between the rabbis. It's not halacha. It's not law. It's what we call agadata, which is where there's a discussion which is there to
But
teach us something. Sorry, go on.
doesn't the Talmud set the basis for halacha?
So absolutely, the Talmud is a conversation and a record. It's a legal record that takes place through rabbinic conversation spanning many centuries. It includes in it the oral law, some of it which was given to Moses at Sinai, but some of it which is just the opinions, albeit cherished opinions and sacred opinions of rabbis throughout the centuries. Most of the Talmud, to slow down, so most of the Talmud is not binding law. There's a conversation which Rabbi A says this, Rabbi B said this. I heard from Rabbi C that Rabbi A said this. Okay, then the halacha is like Rabbi D, which wasn't even mentioned. So the halacha is the bit we care.
Okay.
It's the Talmudic conclusion. Not everything that's in the
But
Talmud is
who?
law.
How do you come to that determination as to what is halacha?
It's called Mesorah. It's based on the tradition. And so there are major codifications of Jewish law that were written by the Rif, the Rambam, the Rosh, and they record what those Talmudic conclusions were based on the tradition that they received, the Mesorah. Similar to Isnad, but slightly different. In Islam,
Okay,
if you
wait.
know
So
Islam. And so,
yeah.
and so none of the major codifications of Jewish law, the books of fiqh, include the three oaths, which is the Talmudic conversation about Jews not having a state until the Messiah arrives. None of them record that as halacha. Not one of them. As Jewish
Okay.
law.
Okay, because what I'm aware of. Obviously, I'm not a Talmud scholar, but I've dug a bit beyond surface level to see that it's primarily debate between. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like two schools of thoughts, like Hillel and Shammai.
So
Shammai tends
kind
to
of,
be
yes,
like
no. Hillel and Shammai are two major schools in the Mishnah period, but there is a diversity of opinions that are outside of Hillel and Shammai that are also contained within the Talmud. But that is there because the Talmud records conversation before Hillel and Shammai,
right,
and so Hillel and Shammai were just the two dominant schools in that period. There were other major schools, but what we have is something called Mesorah, and so Hillel and Shammai received a tradition, and they then passed it on, and they were conflicting
right,
schools of thought. But there's absolute uniformity with Jews as to the overwhelming majority of Jewish law. Where there's divergence is in smaller areas. So, for instance, I follow a rabbi called Rambam. He belongs to a tradition which traces its roots directly to the Geonim, to the Talmudic academies, and he will diverge from, say, a European rabbi like the Rosh in a few areas, and that's fine. They can diverge. It doesn't
right,
change Jewish law.
right. I don't. Yeah. So okay. So but my question was just mainly that so like the Shammai side of things tends to be like a bit more, you'd say, like extreme than Hillel.
Yeah,
So
not
oftentimes,
extreme, but yeah. What you're saying is right.
because
Strict.
some of the stuff I've seen is a bit extreme, but it refers to the end times where, correct me if I'm wrong, the sentiments put out by Shammai, school of Shammai, would be implemented during the end times,
Yeah,
as opposed to
according to a school of thought. But when you go to get a Jewish eschatology, it's not the emphasis of Judaism. In Islam, the emphasis is very much on the end times. The emphasis is very much on Jannah, Jahannam, not burning in the
right,
hellfire. Judaism is
right,
very much focused on this world, making this world as good a place as you can for all people. And so Hillel says the Torah in one sentence would be to treat others as you wish to be treated. Everything else is a commentary on that sentiment.
so not everything in the Talmud is divinely inspired.
So you'll get some Jews that say, yes, everything is divinely inspired and was under Ruach HaKodesh, under a lower form of prophecy. But I don't believe that. I speak as someone who belongs to a school of that has a Mesorah that says that there's definitely the Talmud contains divinely inspired laws direct that were given to Moses at Sinai, but a lot of it was introduced by men to protect the law of Moses. So the Talmud is a book that seeks to bring the Jewish to preserve the Jewish people and orientate them around the law of Moses. It hasn't come to change the law; it's come to protect it, and also to create a cohesive, stable, and unified society. Again, that revolves around the law of Moses. That's the function of the Talmud, or the courts that contributed the laws. So, for
Right.
instance, there are decrees in the Talmud that definitely don't go back to Moses. They were introduced for specific reasons and were introduced to protect the law of Moses.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked that is because, I mean, of course, many times as a pro-Zionist, you face accusations against the Talmud like
Yeah.
a bunch, I can imagine. So that's why I wanted to clarify as to so there's no general consensus amongst Jews that this book is divinely inspired.
So no, every religious Jew will say part to all of it is divinely inspired. So I would say it contains divine law in it that was 100% prophetic and given to Moses. But I'm saying it also contains laws that were introduced by man. It includes medical advice. It includes commentary. It includes a whole
Kind of
host of
like
things.
hadiths in Islam.
Similar to hadiths, but different because hadiths, the hadith sayings and actions of Muhammad and the Sahaba and his companions, and based on his behaviors, what he said, etc. And it's a
Right.
record of that. So it all goes back to this generation. The Talmud goes all the way back to Moses, but most of it is centuries and centuries after Moses. So we're not trying to emulate Moses and the 70 elders. Moses and the 70 elders would have contributed to the early Talmudic thought. And then that would have been given to Joshua and his court, Yusha. And then from Yusha, it goes all the way down to the Kalot of Ravashi and Ravina, which is around 200 years before Muhammad, 150 years, 200 years before Muhammad. And that's when the Talmud is sealed. And so it contains conversations spanning almost 2,000 years.
Okay. So I got the answer to that question. By the way, I don't care to score points or do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I did search up something we were discussing prior, and I just wanted to like clarify something that the Lehi and the Irgun were identified as terrorist groups by British authorities, the United Nations, as
Yeah.
well as the United States and Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
So I mean,
No,
like
that's what I said.
a lot of
Yeah,
people consider them to be terrorists.
and that absolutely, I wouldn't push back on that. I would agree with that. What I'm saying is I don't, and the Haganah didn't. The Israel didn't. Sorry, is what you said. And
You're saying you don't see them as terrorists.
so Irgun definitely not. The Lehi, while I support the sentiment behind the Lehi, particularly when it was directed at the British, they did do certain acts which I would. There were incontestable instances where Lehi, and what Lehi fighters targeted civilians. Now, what I would say is a Lehi fighter isn't necessarily a command. So, and same with an Irgun. Irgun fighters have done stuff. So, Deir Yassin's one of the best examples of a Lehi and Irgun operation. Now, if you move beyond the sensationalist, propagandist claims that were made by the Arabs, Deir Yassin was a battle. It was a battle between Palestinians, largely Palestinians, so locals, Arabs, they weren't Palestinians then, and Lehi and Irgun. And so at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, they approach with loudspeakers to warn people to leave. The loudspeaker comes under attack. Some of the Arab families hear and flee, others don't. Deir Yassin was a heavily fortified building. It had been sniping at Givat Shaul, Beit HaKerem, Jewish communities that were neighbouring it for the days leading up to it. And the Irgun and the Lehi misjudged the fighting capability of Deir Yassin. And I'm going somewhere with this. And so, in an attempt to break the blockade, the siege of Jerusalem, via the area where Deir Yassin is based, they launched the operation and massively misjudged it. By midday, they had heavy casualties, the Lehi and Irgun fighters. And so they switched strategy and started using explosives to go from house to house, throwing in grenades at where they're coming under fire. I can show you images of the heavy fortifications, etc., on the buildings, on the roofs, and there were heavy casualties on the Arab side. And the reason I'm saying all of this is there's one family called the Zaidan family, and the Zaidan family surrender. They'd been fighting. They threw a grenade. There was one of them had rifles. Those clearly fighting the Irgun and Lehi fighters. But when they came out and surrendered, there was an Irgun fighter who said, "This is for Yiftach," and opened fire. Now, the Irgun fighters there at the time said one of the Zaydan family had a rifle, but they shouted, "This is for Yiftach," who was a friend of his who was lying injured next to him, suggests that there was an element of revenge in this. And so this fighter, whatever reason, was responsible for the death of 11 people. And many of them were innocent. Like they weren't fighters. That doesn't mean that was an Irgun policy to massacre civilians, to kill civilians. But in war, an individual may or may not have, depending on how you view that account, carried out an atrocity, killed 11 innocent people. Not 11 innocent, but several innocent people out of a family of 11. And I say several because some of them were armed. Now,
yeah, I'm listening to you. Sorry, I just wanted to just fact check one thing. Okay, right. Yeah. Yeah, but that wasn't the only isolated instance.
No. So the reason I was going into detail with that is the Irgun did not have a policy of killing unarmed people, civilians, etc. If they did, that would put them beyond the pale for me. That's an organization I wouldn't support. I support the liberation of my people. I support for instance, the King David bombing of the hotel. That was a military target. That was the headquarters of the British. The British who were imposed.
You wouldn't consider that a terrorist attack?
No, I wouldn't. I would consider that an attack on the military headquarters. If you can't attack the military headquarters, I mean, if you you could argue, and this is what the British did. This is what the British position was, that they were using terrorism to fight the British. The Zionist position was we were being massacred in Europe. There was a Holocaust. The British had locked the doors. We're now surrounded by hostile Arab armies who are talking about genocide, and we will do everything we can to ensure that we have our say and we're able to protect ourselves. The British were killing Jews. The British were locking the doors. So the British, from a Zionist perspective back then, were a legitimate target. Now, the United Nations, didn't say that.
Zionists, like these were armed Zionists that the British were fighting.
No, so I'm saying it was a civil war.
They weren't like civilian Jews.
The British had hugely betrayed the Jewish people. The British were given mandate over all of the Palestine on the condition they established a Jewish national home there, including Jordan. The first thing they did was give 78% of what was supposed to be my homeland, according to San Remo resolution. They gave it to the Arabs, and then civil war broke out in the remainder. And the British never honoured any. The British created Haji Min al-Husseini. The British made an absolute mess of this region. I believe if the British hadn't failed so miserably, my people, the Arabs and the Jews probably could have coexisted there. I don't know what arrangement we would have had, but instead of electing a moderate, the British instilled Haji Min al-Husseini, who goes on to be one of the chief collaborators of the Nazi regime, one of the highest paid officials in Berlin, an enemy of the British. The British installed him. The minute they got the land, instead of creating the Jewish national home, gave the majority of it away to a family from thousands of kilometers away, the Hashemites. And they established not Palestine, but Jordan. Yeah. And so I think the British, the Jews then had cause.
Can you agree that the British are a huge part of what went wrong? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, no, we do. And that's not to blame everything on the British, but the British massively messed up the opportunity. Right. And I think old people also messed up in various areas. I'm like, we can't just blame it all on the British. It's easy today to blame the Westerner, to blame the white man.
Yeah, but I'm just anti-colonialism, so that's why I tend to criticize them heavily.
Yeah, similarly, I'm anti-colonialism, which is why I'm a Zionist. Get rid of all the colonizers.
Yeah, I feel like if I had more time, we could have a more in-depth conversation. But I just wanted to ask you one last thing. Even though we disagree on pretty much everything, I appreciate it's been like a cordial conversation. But I would really appreciate like a good faith. Not to say that you haven't been good faith, but I really appreciate a good faith answer on this specific question. So, October 7th, lots of unanswered questions about that day. Um, do you think that are you aware of Egyptian intelligence informing the IDF that there were military drills happening on the border like days
The
prior to?
not only that, I've spoke to senior IDF members or officers, generals, etc., security specialists, and they've all shared the same thing with me, that we had lots of evidence that Hamas were doing military drills before the Egyptian intelligence, where we saw them training on what looked like model villages of Jewish settlement, kibbutzim, on the border. And
Okay.
we dismissed it, not because we wanted it to happen. We thought the threat was Hezbollah in the north, who had hundreds of thousands of rockets pointed at us. We thought the threat was much more likely to something was going to happen in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, which is where we had huge numbers of our soldiers deployed. And we didn't think it was going to happen in Gaza because we stupidly thought that Hamas were occupied primarily with the economy. Unemployment was soaring. They were hugely unpopular and becoming increasingly unpopular in Gaza. And all of our military, not all of it, but the majority of our military experts were looking at this, and they were saying that Hamas is not going to do anything. They're occupied with the economy. And so the actual October the 7th occurred on a Jewish Shabbat and
Holiday.
festival. And so
Right.
not only was Gaza border not manned as it would typically be, not manned for security because we thought there was less of a security threat, so we had more of our resources looking to the north and looking to Judea and Samaria. But a lot of the soldiers had gone home to spend time with their families, and so we were particularly vulnerable. And it was a catastrophic failure of intelligence, and people should be held
I
responsible
mean, it
for
is
that failure.
catastrophic. It was also almost uncanny.
It's not that it was
How
uncanny. It was just, it shows what happens when we make one mistake. The ramifications, the consequences can be huge. This was the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust.
Can I ask you how many Jewish civilians died that day?
So it depends how you categorize a civilian. If you're saying someone who isn't actively serving, or if you're saying somebody who isn't on a military base.
We can consider someone who isn't actively serving a civilian, yeah.
So the majority, and I think it's around 800 of the casualties could be categorized as, or incontestably as civilians.
Right.
From memory.
Right. And 250 around of those were taken as hostages.
That's in addition to those, yeah. So additional to 250. Some of the hostages, I think, were also soldiers. So I'm not sure exactly the split of hostages, soldier versus civilian. I don't know that division.
And it's been confirmed there were hundreds of IDF deaths. I believe it to be around 300 to 400.
Yeah, 400 was the number I was going. Yeah, around 400 was the number I was going with.
Yeah, it's just because a lot of times it's being framed as 1,200 civilians were killed that day, primarily through Hamas's atrocities or whatever. So there is that kind of skewed framing in which the fact that IDF soldiers were directly targeted.
But this is just for context. This is 800 people. Like, just say the civilians alone, ignoring the soldiers. 800 civilians in the space of a small in a morning. I mean,
just allow me to land my point. So,
I know he's gone.